In the vast, gleaming halls of the Andromeda University, alien students from different worlds gathered to learn about the many species of the galaxy. Among them was a young alien named Kira, a student from the distant planet Zalmar, known for its advanced technology and strict social rules. She was curious, intelligent, and always eager to learn more about other species. But there was one subject that Kira found particularly fascinating: humans. Kira had heard many stories about Earth, a planet full of strange creatures that lived under the constant threat of destruction. What intrigued Kira most was the way humans were said to function biologically. Her professors often spoke about Earth's creatures, but the humans stood out in every lecture. Unlike most species in the galaxy, humans seemed different, almost too strange to understand fully. One evening, while scrolling through her research data, Kira came across a report on Earth's reproduction. The title caught her eye. Human. Males are always fertile. No mating season. At first, she thought it was a mistake. Surely no species could be fertile all year round. This was unheard of on Zalmar, where males and females went through specific mating seasons. To Kira, it was a biological rule, something every species had to follow. But humans didn't follow this rule. Instead, they could reproduce any time they wanted. Kira's eyes widened as she read through the report. Human males did not wait for a specific time of year to mate. Unlike her species, which had to prepare for a mating season, humans were fertile all the time. This was not only strange, it was revolutionary. Kira sat back in her chair, staring at the glowing text in front of her, her mind racing. She didn't understand. How could it be possible? How did human society manage with this constant fertility? Did they not face the same problems other species faced with their mating cycles? Was it a gift or a curse? Kira had to know more. The next day, she attended a lecture on Earth's biology. The professor, an alien with multiple arms and a stern voice, spoke about Earth's ecosystem, highlighting the differences between Earth's creatures and those of other planets. But when the topic turned to human reproduction, Kira couldn't help herself. She raised her hand, her heart beating fast with the desire to ask her burning question. "Yes, Kira?" the professor asked, nodding toward her. "Professor," Kira began hesitantly, "I've been studying human biology, and I came across something that, well, doesn't make sense to me. The report I read says human males are always fertile, even without a mating season. How is that possible?" The professor paused, his many eyes narrowing as he processed her question. The room fell silent, and Kira could feel the weight of the other students' gazes on her. She had no intention of making herself stand out, but this question was too important to ignore. "That's correct," the professor said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "Human males are fertile year-round. Unlike many species, including those of our own worlds, they do not require a specific mating period. It is part of their evolutionary design. The reason for this is still debated, but it is one of the many fascinating aspects of their biology." Kira's mind whirred with questions. How did this affect their social structure? How did it change the way humans interacted with one another? Were human relationships affected by this strange fertility? The professor continued to speak, but Kira's attention drifted. She had never been so fascinated by a species before. The more she thought about it, the more questions arose. After the lecture, Kira made her way to the university's library. The holographic bookshelves were filled with data from countless species. But today, Kira was focused on one thing: humans. She searched for more reports, hoping to uncover the secrets of human biology. She found papers on human reproduction, mating habits, and even their social dynamics. The more she read, the more she began to see just how different humans were. Unlike the structured mating rituals of her own people, humans seemed to form relationships for many reasons: love, companionship, and even survival. They didn't rely on a specific season to decide when to reproduce. In fact, they did so whenever the time felt right for them. This thought amazed Kira. How did humans manage this without chaos or problems? Did they ever worry about their constant fertility? Kira decided she couldn't just read about it, she needed to learn firsthand. She made up her mind to meet a human student, someone who could explain their biology in a way that no research paper could. But who would she ask? Who would be willing to share their knowledge with a curious alien? There was one human student she knew of, Alex, a young man who often sat alone in the corner of the university's cafeteria. He had a quiet, thoughtful presence and often carried books about human history. Kira had seen him a few times but never spoke to him. Now she knew she had to. The next morning she approached him as he sat at his usual table, flipping through a book. She hesitated but then took a deep breath and asked, "Excuse me, Alex, would you mind explaining something to me?" Alex looked up, startled by the sudden question, but he smiled when he saw Kira's earnest expression. "Sure, Kira. What's on your mind?" Kira took a seat across from him, her curiosity growing by the second. "I've been studying human biology and I found something that doesn't make sense. The report says human males are always fertile. Can you explain how that works?" Alex's smile grew wider. "You really want to know about human fertility? That's a big topic, but I'll try my best to explain." And so, Kira's journey into understanding human biology began. She had only scratched the surface, but she was already hooked. This was just the beginning. Kira sat across from Alex in the quiet corner of the cafeteria, the low hum of students chatting around them, filling the air. Her heart raced with anticipation. The questions she had been too nervous to ask in class now hung in the air between them like an invisible weight. She couldn't ignore them any longer. "So, you're saying?" Kira began slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Human males, they don't have a specific mating season like other species, they're fertile all the time?" Alex took a moment to look at her, his eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and amusement. He could tell she was struggling to grasp the concept, as most aliens would. The idea that humans didn't need a mating season was something that often shocked those from other worlds. Kira's alien culture, on the other hand, revolved around a strict mating cycle. Her species, like most others, had distinct seasons for reproduction, periods of time when males and females were most fertile. The notion of a species that was always fertile seemed almost impossible. "Yeah, that's right," Alex said, his voice calm and steady. "Human males are fertile all year round. We don't wait for some specific time to reproduce. It's just the way we are." Kira's eyes widened as she absorbed his words. The idea was so foreign, so different from everything she knew. She had read about it in the reports, of course, but hearing it from a human, the very species she had been studying for months, made it all feel real. She felt a mix of awe and disbelief. "But why?" Kira asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "How does it work? How do you manage all of this constant fertility? Doesn't it cause problems?" Alex shifted slightly in his seat, thinking carefully about how to answer. He had never had to explain human biology to an alien before. To him it was simply part of being human. But now that Kira asked, he realized how strange it might sound to someone from a species so different from his own. "Well," Alex began slowly, "I guess it's just the way we evolved. We don't have mating seasons because over time, humans learn to adapt. We're a species that thrives in a variety of environments, and being constantly fertile meant we didn't have to wait for a specific time of year to reproduce. It allowed us to be more flexible in how we grow our families and communities." Kira nodded thoughtfully, absorbing his words. She could see the logic in what he was saying, but something still didn't sit right with her. "But don't humans have relationships? I mean, doesn't it affect the way you connect with each other if you're always fertile?" Alex chuckled softly at the question. It was clear that Kira was still grappling with the complexity of human relationships. To her, fertility was tied closely to social bonds, and the idea of being fertile all the time could easily complicate things. On Zalmar, relationships were often about timing, preparation, and the delicate balance of mating cycles. But humans were different. "We do have relationships," Alex explained, his voice warm with understanding. "In fact, being fertile all the time doesn't mean we're constantly focused on reproduction. It's just one part of who we are. We form relationships for a lot of reasons: love, companionship, trust, and sometimes just a need for connection. Our fertility isn't the only thing that drives our choices. It's our emotions, our minds, and the desire to share life with others. Kira sat back, her mind spinning with this new perspective. She had spent so much time analyzing human biology from a scientific angle, looking at the cold facts and figures. But hearing Alex talk about relationships in such an emotional way made her realize something profound. Humans were driven not just by biology but by something deeper, something that went beyond their physical needs. So it's not just about reproduction? Kira asked softly, still processing the depth of what he had said. No, Alex said with a small smile. Not at all. It's about making connections with people, about creating a bond. The fact that we're always fertile doesn't change. The fact that humans need love, friendship, and support, those things are what really matter. Kira looked down at her hands, feeling a strange warmth growing inside her chest. She had always viewed humans from a distance as an anomaly in the galaxy, a species that defied the rules of biology. But now, sitting across from Alex, she was starting to see the bigger picture. She was beginning to understand that humanity's constant fertility wasn't a curse, but a unique trait that allowed them to adapt and thrive in ways no other species could. The conversation shifted, and Kira began asking more questions about human society and relationships. She found herself captivated by Alex's answers, each one revealing a new layer of complexity in human culture. It was more than just biology. It was about how humans navigated their lives, how they overcame challenges, and how they created meaning in a world full of uncertainty. But as the conversation continued, Kira realized something else, something even more unexpected. She was beginning to feel something for Alex, something that went beyond curiosity. She had never felt this way before, especially not toward a human. It was confusing, almost overwhelming, but she couldn't deny it. As the cafeteria grew quieter, the two of them lost track of time. For the first time since arriving at Andromeda University, Kira felt like she was starting to understand humans, not just their biology, but the essence of what made them human, and she couldn't wait to learn more. The days after Kira's conversation with Alex felt like a whirlwind. Each passing moment was filled with new questions, new insights, and new revelations about humans. Kira couldn't stop thinking about what Alex had said. The idea that humans had evolved to be fertile all the time was something she couldn't shake. It defied everything she had learned in her biology classes, and the more she thought about it, the more fascinated she became. One evening, Kira sat alone in the university's quiet study room, her fingers lightly tapping on the surface of her desk. Her eyes scanned the data on her holographic screen, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the strange and wonderful human species. She had to understand more. She needed to dive deeper into the science of human evolution. She opened another file. This one focused on human evolution, specifically their reproductive system. As the information loaded, Kira's mind raced. Human evolution, unlike many other species in the galaxy, had moved away from the traditional need for a mating season. Instead, they had developed a form of fertility that was constant, uninterrupted, by cycles or seasons. It was so different from the reproductive systems of other species, including her own. Kira scanned through the reports and studies, absorbing as much as she could. What struck her most was how humanity's constant fertility had shaped their entire way of life. According to the data, humans had developed social structures, family dynamics, and even cultural practices that were deeply intertwined with this unique biological trait. She paused, reading a particular passage aloud to herself, her voice low and thoughtful. Humans do not rely on mating seasons to reproduce. Their ability to reproduce year-round has influenced their social and familial structures, making them adaptable to changing environments and unpredictable circumstances. This constant fertility has enabled humans to thrive in a variety of ecosystems, even in the most hostile conditions. Kira leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. How could a species so different from her own have adapted so completely to their environment? The more she studied, the more she realized that human biology wasn't just a product of chance. It was a result of millions of years of evolution. The fact that they were always fertile was just one piece of the puzzle, but it was a piece that had allowed humanity to become the dominant species on Earth. She continued reading, digging deeper into the genetic studies that revealed how human fertility had shaped not just their social dynamics, but their ability to survive. Unlike her species, whose reproductive system was tied to specific seasons, humans had no such limitations. They could reproduce whenever the need arose, which meant they could form families and communities at any time, adapting quickly to changes in their environment. It was no wonder that humans had survived and thrived in such a diverse and often dangerous world. But as Kira's fascination grew, so did her questions. If humans were so adaptable, if their constant fertility was such a powerful tool for survival, why didn't other species share this trait? Why had evolution shaped humans this way? And what did it mean for her own species, whose reproductive cycle was so rigid and predictable? Kira had always believed that the biological systems of different species were set in stone, fixed by millions of years of evolution. But the more she learned about humanity, the more she began to wonder if evolution was as inflexible as she had thought. Could it be that humans had evolved in a way that allowed them to break free from the traditional rules of biology? Could it be that their ability to reproduce year-round was the key to their success, not just as individuals but as a species? The questions piled up, and Kira's mind became a whirlwind of curiosity and awe. She couldn't help but compare human biology to her own. In Zalmar, the rules of mating were simple and rigid. Males and females only had a brief window each year when they could mate, and the entire society was built around this cycle. It was efficient, yes, but it was also limiting. Kira had never considered the possibility of a species evolving outside of those constraints. And yet, here she was learning about a species that had done just that. For the first time in her life, Kira felt a deep sense of admiration for humanity. They had managed to thrive without the limitations of a mating season, without the need to wait for the right time to reproduce. It was as if they had mastered the art of living in the moment, adapting to their circumstances and embracing the unpredictability of life. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, the door to the study room slid open, and Alex walked in, holding a stack of books. He looked up and smiled when he saw her, clearly surprised to find her here so late. "Hey, Kira," Alex greeted her, his voice friendly and relaxed. "I didn't expect to see you here. Everything okay?" Kira looked up, her eyes meeting his with a mix of excitement and wonder. She felt as though she had just uncovered something monumental, something that had changed her perspective on life itself. But there was still so much more to understand. I've been reading about humans," Kira said, her voice filled with awe. "About your evolution, about how you're always fertile. It's amazing. I never realized how deeply your biology shapes your entire way of life. You don't just survive, you adapt, you thrive." Alex raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her sudden excitement. "Yeah, that's pretty much how it works," he said with a smile, "but I'm glad you're starting to see what makes humans so different." Kira nodded slowly, feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. She had started this journey with nothing but scientific curiosity, but now as she learned more, she felt something else growing inside her, a deep admiration for humanity's resilience, its ability to adapt and thrive against all odds. But there was something more, something she couldn't quite put into words. She wasn't just fascinated by their biology. She was beginning to connect with them on a deeper level. It was as if understanding their fertility had unlocked something in her, something she never expected to find in a human. Alex set the books down on the table and took a seat across from her. "You seem really into this," he said, his voice warm. "Are you okay?" Kira smiled, her mind still racing. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think I'm just starting to realize something. Something important. Humans are incredible. I've never met a species like you." Kira walked briskly down the winding halls of the university, her thoughts racing faster than her footsteps. After weeks of studying human biology and culture, she had reached a point where she could no longer stay silent. The more she learned about humanity, the more complex and profound their ways seemed. But today something had sparked within her, something she couldn't ignore. In one of the grand lecture halls, Kira had overheard a conversation between two of her professors, a heated debate about human reproduction. The topic was familiar to her, but this time it wasn't just a matter of academic interest. It was personal. It was about humanity's survival, their resilience, and the constant fertility that had so intrigued her for weeks. Kira stood outside the lecture hall, her nerves tingling with anticipation. She had to speak out. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The room fell silent as Kira entered, and all eyes turned toward her. At the front of the room, Professor Orlin, a tall alien with multiple limbs and an intimidating presence, stood alongside Professor Saren, who was known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense attitude. Both had been involved in the conversation that Kira had overheard, and now it was her turn to take the floor. "I have something to add," Kira said, her voice steady, but her heart pounded in her chest. "About human fertility." The professors exchanged a quick glance, surprised but intrigued. Kira had always been a quiet student, content to observe, but now she was speaking with purpose. She continued, "I don't think we fully understand what human fertility means, not just biologically, but socially and culturally. I've been studying them, and I believe their constant fertility is not a flaw but a unique strength." Professor Orlin raised an eyebrow. "A strength?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "Kira, surely you see the danger in such a trait. A species with constant fertility. This could lead to overpopulation, resource depletion, and eventually collapse. It's a biological flaw that nature should have corrected long ago." Kira's eyes narrowed. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I don't think it's a flaw. I think it's an adaptation. Humans have learned to live with this trait. It's not a curse. It's part of what makes them so resilient. They don't wait for a mating season like we do. They don't depend on specific cycles. They can reproduce whenever they need to, which gives them the flexibility to adapt to changing environments and unpredictable circumstances." Professor Saren, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward with a skeptical expression. "But don't you see the risks, Kira? Without a mating season, how can humans form stable relationships? How can they ensure that they don't overpopulate their world? This constant fertility could lead to chaos, not survival." Kira's heart raced. She had expected resistance, but she wasn't prepared for the overwhelming certainty in their voices. The more they spoke, the more she realized how deeply ingrained their beliefs were. But she couldn't back down now. She had spent weeks uncovering the hidden beauty of humanity's biology, and she wasn't about to let anyone dismiss it as a flaw. "No," Kira said again, her voice firm. "Humans don't overpopulate because they don't just reproduce mindlessly. Their culture, their families, and their relationships are built on something deeper, something more than just biology. They form bonds based on trust, love, and mutual respect. The fact that they're always fertile doesn't mean they're constantly reproducing. It means they can create families at any time, adapt to any situation." There was a tense silence in the room. The professors exchanged another look, clearly taken aback by Kira's words. They hadn't expected such a passionate defense of humans, especially from someone as logical and scientifically minded as Kira. Professor Orlin crossed his arms, his many eyes narrowing. "So, you're saying that humans, with their endless fertility, have somehow created a balance between reproduction and survival. How do you explain their environmental challenges, their wars, their struggles?" Kira paused, feeling the weight of the question. She had studied Earth's problems, its environmental crises, its political conflicts, and its wars. But she knew the answer to this question wasn't simple. "Humans do face challenges," Kira said softly. "But I believe that their fertility is not the cause of their problems. It's how they've learned to navigate those problems that matters. They face issues of overpopulation, yes, but they're also incredibly resourceful. They build, adapt, and find solutions. Their constant fertility hasn't destroyed them. It's allowed them to evolve in ways that other species haven't. Professor Sarin looked at Kira with a mix of admiration and skepticism. "And you think this makes them superior?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Because they can reproduce at any time?" Kira shook her head, her voice quieter, now but filled with conviction. "No, I don't think it makes them superior. I think it makes them different. They've adapted to their world in a way that no one else has, and that's something to admire." The room was silent for a long moment. Kira could feel the weight of the conversation, the tension hanging in the air. She had never spoken so boldly in front of her professors before, and yet she felt a strange sense of peace. She had spoken her truth. Finally, Professor Orland sighed. "You may be right, Kira," he said, his voice softer than before. "Perhaps we have overlooked the resilience of humanity, but you must understand it's not just about biology. It's about the consequences of that biology. We must consider the full picture." Kira nodded, grateful that the conversation had taken a more thoughtful turn. "I understand, but I think the full picture includes how humans learn, grow, and adapt. They aren't perfect. They face problems. But their fertility is part of what allows them to keep going, to keep evolving." With that, Kira turned to leave the lecture hall. The argument wasn't over, but she had made her point. She felt a surge of pride, not because she had won the debate, but because she had stood up for what she believed. She didn't have all the answers, but she was beginning to understand that humanity's fertility was only one part of their story. And that story, Kira realized, was far from finished. Kira had never imagined that her studies on human biology would lead her to this point. What had started as a simple academic inquiry into their reproductive systems had turned into something far more profound, something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, adaptation, and survival. The days following, her debate with the professors were filled with a quiet sense of urgency. Kira couldn't stop thinking about humanity's constant fertility, but it wasn't just the biological aspect anymore. It was how this unique trait had woven itself into the very fabric of human society. The more she reflected on what she had learned, the more it became clear to her. Humans had found ways to thrive, not in spite of their constant fertility, but because of it. Yet, as she sat in her dorm room late one evening, surrounded by holographic screens filled with data and research, Kira began to realize that there were consequences to everything, even the things that seemed like advantages. Her mind wandered back to the stories Alex had shared with her. He had talked about human history, about the wars and struggles, the rise and fall of civilizations, and the constant cycle of growth and decay. As much as humanity had thrived, they had also faced immense challenges, and their constant fertility, which had allowed them to adapt and grow, had also contributed to the very crises they now faced. Kira had read about Earth's environmental degradation, the overpopulation issues, and the resource scarcity that threatened many regions of the planet. For the first time, Kira wondered, was humanity's ability to reproduce at any time really a gift? Or had it been a driving force behind their greatest problems? She opened a file on Earth's history and scrolled through reports of social unrest, political instability, and the environmental disasters that had been exacerbated by overpopulation. Human cities, once thriving, were now struggling under the weight of too many people. Ecosystems were collapsing. The balance of nature was fragile, and humans were doing their best to adapt, but it was becoming clear that their constant fertility had set in motion a chain of events that they couldn't stop. Kira's stomach churned as she read about the growing number of refugees, the resource wars, and the devastating effects of climate change. It was clear that humans, despite their resilience, were on the edge of collapse. The very adaptability that had allowed them to survive had also created a situation where they were living on the edge of destruction. For the first time, Kira felt a deep sense of unease. She had admired humanity's ability to reproduce and grow, but now she was beginning to see the darker side of that ability, the consequences of living without limits, without the natural rhythms that other species depended on. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from her communicator. It was Alex. He had sent her a message, a simple text that read, "Hey Kira, I wanted to check in. You okay?" Kira stared at the message, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't spoken to Alex since their last conversation, but tonight, she felt an overwhelming need to talk to him. She quickly typed back, "Can we meet? I need to talk about something." Within minutes, Alex replied, "Of course, where should we meet?" Kira didn't hesitate. She typed, "The old observatory. I'll be there in 15 minutes." The observatory was quiet when Kira arrived. The vast windows looked out over the city, and the stars beyond seemed to beckon with their infinite possibilities. Kira paced back and forth, her mind still reeling from the questions that had been circling in her head. When Alex arrived, she turned to face him, her expression serious. "Alex, I've been thinking a lot about what we've talked about, about human fertility. And I've started to wonder if it's really as simple as we thought." Alex raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Kira looked out at the stars for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Humans are incredibly adaptable, I get that. But I think their constant fertility might have caused problems they didn't expect. It's created a cycle that they can't control. Overpopulation, environmental collapse, wars over resources. They're facing consequences because they never had a natural limit, and I wonder if that's what's pushing them to the edge." Alex was quiet for a long moment, processing what Kira had said. "You've been reading about Earth's problems, haven't you?" Kira nodded, her voice heavy. "I've been looking at the history of your planet, and I don't think anyone realized how deeply connected your fertility was to all of this. It's like you're living in a world where everything's constantly growing, and now it's too much. Too many people, too many demands on resources." Alex looked at her, his expression somber. "I see what you mean. But the thing is, Kira, we're not blind to it. We know what's happening and we're trying to fix it. It's not about fertility alone. It's about how we've used our resources, how we've lived our lives." Kira turned to face him, her gaze intense. "But isn't that the problem? Humanity's fertility has always been at the core of your survival, but it also means you never had to stop. You never had a natural way to say enough. Your society is built on growth, but now that growth is suffocating you." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I guess it's true. We never had a reason to limit ourselves, not in the way other species do, but now we're paying the price for it." Kira paused, her voice softening. "And what happens now? What can you do when the system you built is causing the very problems you're trying to fix?" Alex looked out the window, his expression troubled. "I don't know, but we're trying to change. We're adapting, just like we always have. Maybe the answer is not to limit ourselves, but to find a new way to grow." Kira felt a strange sense of hope flicker within her. Maybe humanity hadn't reached the end yet. Maybe, despite everything, there was still a way forward. She didn't have all the answers. But as she stood there, looking out at the stars with Alex, Kira knew one thing for certain. Humanity's story was far from over. And whatever came next, they would find a way to adapt, just as they always had. The days following her conversation with Alex left Kira in a state of quiet contemplation. As much as she had admired humanity's resilience and adaptability, the weight of her thoughts about their constant fertility and the consequences it had on their world continued to linger. It wasn't just the biological trait that fascinated her anymore. It was how humanity navigated the challenges it brought. Yet, despite her growing understanding of their struggles, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. The tension inside her had been building for days, but it wasn't until that fateful afternoon in the university's quiet, dimly lit garden that everything changed. Kira had taken refuge there, trying to gather her thoughts. She walked among the lush alien plants, their neon leaves shimmering in the soft light. The world outside seemed to move at a fast pace, but here, In the quiet sanctuary of the garden, Kira found solace. It was there, amidst the distant hum of the university's artificial atmosphere, that she received a message that would shake her to her core. Her communicator pinged softly, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw that the message was from her home planet, Zalmar. It was from her sister, Lyra. "Kira, I need to talk to you. This is urgent. Please respond as soon as you can." Her heart skipped a beat. Lyra was always calm, measured, never one to use words like urgent. Something had to be wrong. Kira quickly activated the holographic connection, and her sister's face appeared, her eyes wide with distress. "Kira," Lyra said urgently, her voice shaky. "I don't know how to say this, but you need to know. We've just received disturbing news. Zalmar is dying." Kira blinked, her mind racing to make sense of the words. "What do you mean? The planet? What's happened?" Lyra took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "It's our population. We haven't been able to reproduce fast enough. The resources are dwindling. Our systems are failing. We didn't evolve quickly enough, Kira. Our species can't survive like this. The scientists are calling it a crisis, and it's getting worse every day. We've exhausted every solution we could think of, and it's only a matter of time before it's too late." Kira stood still, her world suddenly spinning. She had always known that Zalmar, like many species, had faced the consequences of slow, evolutionary progress. But hearing her sister say those words, "We can't survive like this," struck her like a physical blow. She was silent for a long moment, struggling to comprehend the gravity of the situation. "How can this be happening?" Kira whispered. "We've always known that our reproductive system was slow, but we never thought—" "I know," Lyra interrupted, her voice filled with sorrow. "But we thought we had more time. We thought we could find a way to fix it. But now, Kira, I'm not so sure. Our biological clock is ticking, and we can't adapt quickly enough. Meanwhile, you've been studying humans, haven't you? Their constant fertility. It's kept them alive, thriving in ways we never could." Kira felt a sharp pang in her chest. It was as if a wall had suddenly come crashing down around her, the realization that her species' survival was no longer guaranteed. She had spent so much time studying humanity, admiring them for their ability to adapt and survive, but she hadn't fully understood what it meant until now. "You're saying they've survived because of their constant fertility?" Kira asked, her voice trembling. That's what made them different. But Lyra, Zalmar, can't replicate that. We can't be like them. Our species is built on a slow, careful cycle. We didn't evolve quickly enough." "I know, Kira." Lyra's voice softened, filled with regret. "But I think you were right about humans. They don't wait for a perfect time, a perfect season. They don't have cycles like we do. They adapt. They evolve quickly. Maybe they don't have all the answers, but they're surviving in ways we haven't been able to. And that's what saved them." Kira's mind was spinning as Lyra's words echoed in her head. Adapt, evolve quickly, survive. She had always admired humanity's adaptability, but she hadn't realized just how crucial that was for their survival. Until now. The thought sent a ripple of doubt and confusion through her. If humanity could adapt to their environment, no matter the odds, then perhaps the issue wasn't about fertility alone. It was about how each species evolved to face the challenges of their world. Suddenly, Kira realized something else, the truth she had been missing all along. Humanity's constant fertility wasn't just about reproduction, it was about their adaptability. It was a survival mechanism. But in a strange twist of fate, humanity had something her own species did not. The ability to evolve in real time, to adapt quickly to their environment, to survive change. The realization hit Kira like a flood. If humans had survived the way they had despite all odds, then perhaps the solution wasn't in avoiding their constant fertility. It was in embracing it. The humans had learned to adapt, to keep evolving, to never be confined by the limitations of cycles and seasons. They thrived because of it. But what about Zalmar? What about her people? She looked back at her sister's image, struggling to find words. Lyra, she said softly, maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. Maybe the answer isn't in waiting for the right time to reproduce, or in trying to force a cycle that doesn't work anymore. Maybe the answer is to adapt, to change. Lyra's expression softened, and for the first time, Kira saw a flicker of hope in her sister's eyes. Do you really think that's possible? Can Zalmar evolve like humanity did? Kira stared at the stars outside the window, her mind racing. She didn't know if it was possible, but one thing was clear. Humanity's way of survival wasn't just about fertility. It was about constant change, constant adaptation. And maybe that was the answer, not just for Earth, but for Zalmar as well. I don't know, Kira whispered, a sense of determination growing inside her. But we have to try. Kira stood at the edge of the university's observatory, gazing out over the vast expanse of the city below. The lights from the buildings flickered like distant stars, and the hum of activity from the streets far below seemed like a faint heartbeat. The world felt both enormous and incredibly small in this moment. So much had changed for her over the past few weeks. Her studies, her thoughts, and the very way she viewed humanity had been irrevocably transformed. But even as her mind wandered over the complexities of human biology and the struggles of her own species, something else lingered in the back of her mind: the decision. Kira had spent the last few days grappling with the knowledge that her own planet, Zalmar, was on the brink of extinction. The realization that her species had been unable to adapt quickly enough to its changing environment weighed heavily on her. But now, more than ever, she saw that the problem wasn't just about fertility or biology, it was about evolution. The speed with which a species could change, adapt, and grow. Humanity, she realized, had something her own species didn't: an innate ability to adapt to the changing world around them. They could reproduce constantly, yes, but they could also adjust, evolve, and find solutions when things went wrong. Zalmar, on the other hand, had been slow, too reliant on predictable cycles that nature itself had altered over time. Their fertility was their downfall, not their advantage. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie, and Kira turned to see Alex approaching. He had been a constant presence in her journey, someone who had helped her see humanity not just as a subject of study, but as a living, breathing species with all the complexities of survival. Alex stopped a few feet away, his gaze following hers toward the city below. "You've been thinking about it, haven't you?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with understanding. Kira nodded, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," she said quietly. "About humanity, about Zalmar, about how we've all adapted or failed to adapt in the face of change. I've learned so much, Alex, more than I ever expected. But now, I have to decide." Alex glanced at her, his expression filled with concern. "What do you mean, decide?" Kira took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "I can't ignore what's happening to Zalmar. My people are on the edge of extinction because we didn't evolve fast enough. And here I am, learning about humans, how they constantly adapt, constantly evolve, and never wait for the right time to act. I think I've found a way forward. But it's a risky path." Alex stepped closer, his eyes focused on her. "What are you saying, Kira? What's the decision you have to make?" Kira turned to face him fully now, her expression resolute, despite the uncertainty that still swirled inside her. "I'm not sure Zalmar can survive the way we are, but maybe we don't need to. Maybe we need to adapt like humans did. We've always relied on cycles, on timing, on predictability. But humans don't wait for perfect timing. They adapt, even when the world is falling apart around them." She paused, feeling the weight of her own words. "I could stay, here continue my research and learn more about humanity's survival. But I think the real lesson is in what humanity does next. They don't wait for the world to give them answers. They make answers. And maybe that's what Zalmar needs. Alex's gaze softened, and he took a step back, giving her space to process. So you're saying you want to help Zalmar change? To help them adapt the way humans have? Kira nodded. Yes, but it's not just about biological adaptation. It's about the mindset. Humans don't wait for the world to catch up with them. They make their own future. They adapt because they have no choice. They've built their society around flexibility, around the ability to change course when things go wrong. And I think Zalmar needs that. We need to rethink everything, not just our biology, but how we think about survival. Alex smiled gently, as though a weight had lifted from his shoulders. That sounds like something only you could figure out, Kira. I think you're right. Maybe Zalmar has a chance, but only if they're willing to break free from their old ways and embrace the future. But you can't do that alone. Kira's heart swelled at his words. She knew this was bigger than herself. It was about an entire species, an entire planet. But deep down, she also knew that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their biology. It was their ability to think differently, to face obstacles head-on, and to create their own destiny. I don't know if I can do it, Kira admitted, her voice softer now. But I have to try. I have to go back to Zalmar, Alex. I can't ignore the lessons I've learned here. I've seen how humans survive, how they fight back against the odds, and I believe we can do the same. Alex nodded, his expression full of support. I'll help you, Kira. Whatever it takes. The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter as Kira turned back to the city below, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. The decision wasn't easy. In fact, it felt like the weight of two worlds rested on her shoulders. But the path forward was clear now, more than it had ever been. She had learned from humanity, not just their biology, but their resilience, and now it was time to bring those lessons home. Kira took one final look at the distant city, the lights flickering like tiny sparks in the darkness. Then, with a sense of determination, she turned away and began the journey back to Zalmar. The future wasn't written yet, but it was hers to shape. And this time, she wouldn't wait for the right season.